Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I hope you all are doing absolutely well. So guys, in today's video we are going to cover an important topic, that is components in Angular. So first of all, let us understand what is components. So components is nothing but a reusable piece of code that can be written once and it can be reused multiple times. So this is the major functionality or the benefit of components. Now let us understand in this video what all the things that we are going to understand. First of all, we are going to see what is a standalone component. Then we are going to see how can we create a component. And finally, we are going to display our component on screen, that is on our DOM. So let us understand a bit more about components. So if you are new to the Angular or any web technology, and if you might not know that what is a component, so you can take an example of this YouTube website itself. Okay, so here we can see that every single thing is a component. Okay, for example, this top banner, okay, this is one component. Then sidebar can be considered as a component. Again, these cards can be considered as component, and this entire card section is also one component. Now in this way, why do we create multiple components is because if I'm going to my home page, there are also the similar kinds of cards I have to display. So I don't have to write the code for cards again all over again, right? So I can use the same component, I can call it and I can give it different properties, and based on that I can make my code reusable at multiple places. So this is one of the major benefits of technologies like Angular and React, that it provides component based architecture in which we can write component once and it can be reused again and again. And we are working on the latest Angular version, which is Angular 17. So from Angular 15, the previous way of creating and importing an Angular component is now changed. So in the previous versions, what we used to do is we used to create a component and then we used to import it in our module files and then we used to display it on our screen. But now the components are standalone components. By default, the components that we get are standalone components. So let us see what is a standalone component. A standalone component in Angular is a self-contained within its own code, styling and template. It can be used independently across projects, promoting code reuse and modularity. Now we are going to see standalone components in practical. Also, if you are not aware how we used to create components previously before Angular 15, then in the next video we are going to understand what are modules. So in that video I will cover how we used to create modules in the previous versions of React, because that is also important. If you are going to work in any industry, it is very important that you know both the ways, with the latest version and with the previous versions also. So let us now go to our code editor. So now we are in our app.component.html file, and in our previous video we have written all of this code. So let me remove the basic code first, and this is how my app.component.html looks now. What we need to do now is we need to generate a new component. So for that, in our last video, we have seen the command ng-gc and our component name. So once we execute this command, we get 4 files that gets generated for us. So here we can see our 4 files are here. Now we want to display this component on our screen. For that, what we need to do is we need to import this component in our app component. Now what we will do is we will go to our app.component.ts file and we are going to import this. So for that, I'm going to write import, then our component name. So hello component, and then it will be imported from the particular path. So once this is imported, the next thing that we want to do is we want to write it inside our import statements. So here I'm going to write it. Once it is done, now we have imported our component. The next thing that we want to do is we have to write it inside our app.component.html file, then only it will be displayed on screen. So I'm going to write app hello. Okay, so this is basically the selector of my hello component. Once I save this, you can see hello works is displayed on the screen. So this is how we can import a component into another component. Let us understand how can we write CSS for this component that we have recently created. So for example, in hello.component.html, my content is written inside my p tag. So let me apply some style on my p tag. So in the CSS file, what I'm going to write is I'm going to write a p tag and I'm going to give it a color red, and we can see the text is displaying in red color. So till now what we have seen is we have written our HTML code in a separate template file, okay, and our CSS code in a separate, but there are other ways also we can write the CSS and template or HTML code in the same file itself, that is our component.ts file. So how can we do it? First of all, let us understand what our component.ts file contains. So the first statement is import component from angular/core. This is for because we are using this component here, so we have to import it. Okay, then in this component we are mentioning few lines. First one is the selector. Selector is used for displaying our component in other components. Next is our standalone. So we have already seen what is a standalone component, and we know by default whatever the components that we create now in the latest version are standalone components. Now, as I mentioned, if we create a new component later on, and if we want to import that component in our hello component, then we are going to mention that component in this import line. Okay. Next is our template URL. This is basically mentioning the path for our HTML file, and then style URL is mentioning the path for our CSS file. Okay. So in this way, we have seen how can we write HTML code and CSS code in separate files. Now let us write the HTML and CSS code in this same file itself. So for that, what I will do is, instead of template URL, I'm just going to write template, and instead of style URL, I'm going to write styles, because we are going to write inline styles. So I'm going to remove this content from here. So first of all, let us write a basic statement in our template. So I'm going to write h1 hello world. Then in my styles, I'm going to give it a basic style. So how can we give a style? First of all, we have to use this brackets and then backticks, and inside this we can give any of the styles. So let's give the style to h1, and I'm going to give it a color of blue. And now if you see on our screen, it is updated. We are getting hello world, and that too it is a h1 with the color of blue. So in this way, there are multiple ways of writing code in our component files. One way was to write it in separate files. The other way is to write inline in this way in one file itself. But in most of the cases, we write it in separate files, because if we write all the things in the same file, it's get messy and tough to understand. But if we have basic 2 or 3 lines of codes that we want to write, so we can write it in this way also. Next important thing is, we have one command. So let me clear my console. For example, we have one command to generate a component in such a way that while generating the component itself, we do not get this test file, because in most cases we do not need this test files if we are not performing testing. So there are multiple ways that you can do. What you can do is, you can generate your component completely initially, then you can do a cleanup where you will remove your or delete your test file, and then you can also delete your CSS and HTML files if you don't need them, and then you can write the code all in one file itself, that is your component.ts. How we have done it just. And now what if I want, what I can do is, I can delete these 3 files because I am no longer using them. So let me delete it, and let's see whether our app is working fine or not. So if you see, our app is still working fine, because we are not writing any code using those files. So now let us consider a case where I do not have to perform the cleanup. Like, I generate a component first and I delete those files. What I want is, while creating the component itself, those files gets not generated. So for that, what I can do is, I can run the command ng-gc my component name. So in this command, what I have written, ng-gc login, this will generate a component for us with these properties, that is skip test. It will skip the test file for us. It will not generate the test file. Inline template, what this will do is, this will consider that we are going to write inline HTML, so it won't generate HTML file also. And then inline style will consider that we are going to write our style inline, so it won't generate our CSS file too. And we are going to get only one file, that is our component.ts. So in our login.component.ts, you can see we have already got template in place of template URL, because it is considering that we are writing inline template, and styles in place of style URL. So because here it is considering that we are going to write everything inline. So in this way, there are different ways of writing code in our component files, that is inline way, and the other one was writing code in separate files. So that's all for this video. I think we have seen a lot of things in this video. First of all, we understood what is a standalone component, how can we create a component, and how can we display our component on screen. So in the next video, we are going to see what is modules and how we used to write code previously before Angular version 15, where we used to import our components in module files, because now in the latest version, what we do is, we create standalone components, and by default the components that we create are standalone, so we do not have to import them in any of the file like modules. We directly import it into our main app component. So that's all for this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe to the channel to get all the latest updates.